I'd like to welcome everybody here. We'll probably still get some additional folks joining us, which is absolutely great. Bob Coppage, Simplex IT CEO, Graham Puba, all that kind of fun stuff. And this is a quick 30-minute review, and this is one of our what we call 30 by 30. So it's 30 minutes of presentation. Then I'm opening it up for comments, questions, answers. But also, if you guys have some experience with Windows 11 and what's worked for you and the like, the first 30 minutes, the presentation part, that will be pushed up on YouTube. The second part, the open discussion, will not. It's just going to be live. That's it. That's basically so we can be a little bit more perhaps open on the conversation than we otherwise would if we knew it was YouTube perpetuity. So absolutely, please put in, if you have any questions, put them in as comments for right now, but we will open it up for everybody's, microphone, camera, whatever else you want to do. We are recording this and the like, and let's get started. Okay. And anyone who arrives late, if they ask a question and it's already been covered, don't anyone give them the answer. Okay. Windows 11 is coming. We've all seen that before. First of all, a little bit of news about us, all that. Simplex IT, we're managed service providers that do both what we call pure MSP services, where we're the complete IT department, both tactically and strategically for organizations, as well as the commits or co-managed. And written a few books. And if any of you would like a copy of the CEO Survival Guide to Information Technology, which is for CEOs or people who want to understand CEOs and what they need to know for IT, or the I Don't Want Your Job, talking about is co-managed IT services the right fit for you, just let me know, email me, and happy to send you a copy of either and or both books. Why? Because I'm that swell of a guy. Well, actually, we use it for marketing and sales, but anyway. Hey, John, how are you doing?
Hey.
Okay, so caveats, as always. I want to be real clear. This is personal experience plus research and taking a look into it. We have not done a deep dive analysis here at Simplex IT for Windows 11. And I am sure that Microsoft will still be changing some things. And some of the conclusions you're going to hear from me are conjecture based on I'm very, very old experience with Microsoft and what they do and all that kind of fun stuff. I remember when PCs first came out, because technically speaking, I am old. So take everything with a grain of salt. We are going to cover a lot of stuff in 30 minutes, which means we're not going to cover them wonderfully. We're going to do the best job we can, but we've got a lot of stuff to cover, but we're really going to talk about all of these points. I'm not going to just repeat them now because we're going to go after them. First of all, Windows 11, every OS and every upgrade of software, hardware, one of the first things I like to do is to get an idea as to whether or not it's evolutionary or revolutionary. And what I mean by that is this something that is going to significantly change how our current status quo works? And by the way, I'm going to mostly talk about this from either a CEO looking at their IT requirements for their organization, or looking at it from internal IT support, meaning what you're looking at for your organization. So unfortunately, not going to talk much about home use, not going to talk much about the gaming changes that are, because I still think Wing Commander was the best PC game of all. You're not going to convince me otherwise. But from this perspective, Windows 11 versus Windows 10 is, in my opinion, completely evolutionary, not revolutionary. I think you're going to see few legacy issues from 10 to 11. At least I haven't seen a whole lot of them. And most of them are going to be behavioral stuff and Microsoft really trying to drive you to use their dog food more than somebody else's. And this is especially going to be true on some of the browser stuff. And we'll talk about that to a degree. But when you look at it from an end user standpoint, when you look at it from an application, from requirements, all of that kind of fun stuff, this is not where a company is going to have to buy all new hardware, with some exceptions. This is not where you're going to have a huge learning curve for your end users, with some exceptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So right out of the gate, in my opinion, it is evolutionary. So let's start with non-meaningful new stuff, as I call it. That's a technical term. One of the things that they're trying to do, I think, is and this is where I'm going to switch back and forth between the screen and the screen. So first of all, this is the desktop. So this is what you see. Now I've also got a couple other monitors here, but this is the main or primary desktop. And you'll notice, first of all, the taskbar is a little tighter. What they're doing is they're packing it down, and you're going to see some things there that you're going to see across the board where you're going to see and say, wow, that looks like Chrome, or that looks like iOS. They're stealing from these guys, they're stealing from those guys, and that's only because you're absolutely right. That is what they're doing. They're basically trying to find some ways to put more consistency in, and they're taking, like, one of the things I've always said, one of the biggest differences between Apple stuff and Microsoft stuff is Apple has one way of doing anything. Microsoft has 20 different ways of doing everything, and they're a little better, a little worse, a little different, but they're most of all confusing. And you're going to see a tightening of that on Windows 11. So some of the features, some of the properties, some of the things are going to be, I don't want to say harder to do. They're going to be harder to do to the minutia level that you might be used to. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that. So we start with a taskbar that's actually tighter. We don't have it spread out or drawn out all the way across. So you can almost say that the percentage of space of real estate that's used is smaller. You don't so far have the flexibility of putting the taskbar to the left, right, up, down, all that kind of fun stuff, which drives Kevin, who's our tech director here, drives him absolutely nuts. So kudos to you, Microsoft. One of the other things you're going to see is a little bit of a difference, a more spread out start menu. So there's a bit of an overhaul on this. By and large, though, if someone has been using Windows 10, you're not going to have to teach them how to do things completely over. There's a little bit of a difference as far as, so I right click here, all I get is taskbar settings. So there's a little bit of difference between some of these things, but for the most part, I would say these are cleanups. File Explorer, you also see it's a little bit cleaner as far as things that you have and some of the options. One of the other is widgets are back. So let me left sweep with my finger and I see widgets, not dead people, totally different concept. But these are things that there's a number of these that are added by Microsoft. You can also, there will be some additional ones that are added as well. Those of you who remember Windows Vista, wasn't that bad. They kind of tried this before, they're trying it again. And you can either control those from down here, or you can control it here. And you can add widgets. These are the ones that are included. And once you have the widgets, you then also have all of their Microsoft news. Those of you who use the default landing page for Edge has seen a majority of this stuff already. Am I crazy about widgets? Not even remotely. I think they're cute, they're okay, but nothing exciting. The other thing I want to show you is what's called the Action Center. And if you'll notice, back in Windows 10, we used to go after these things individually. So we would go after the network, now they're blocked. So by just clicking here on these three items, it's one pop-up, and I can go after available Bluetooth airplane. That's kind of nice. And same thing over here, along with notifications. Notifications are things, and you can configure to a certain degree, and you'll see the circular number. Again, these aren't necessarily different than what we've seen in Windows 10, but they're now consolidating to make them a little bit easier. To me, these aren't critical. These really aren't going to do anything that they're not going to make or break whether you go with this or don't go with this. But I do think for people who are, I would say, starting on computers, but I don't know what that means anymore. I think for people, this is not going to be hard to train. So you're not looking at a huge learning curve as far as this stuff goes. So like I say, these are what I call the non-meaningful new stuff. And as you dive through Windows 10, or excuse me, Windows 11, you're going to find more and more of these things that are really the same way or the same things we had before. They're just consolidated, or standardized. And there's a lot of features, I don't say a lot of features, but a lot of setup screens and a lot of property screens that haven't really changed much since really, you can almost say Windows 95. They are now changing and they're getting more consistent. So one of the challenges is going to be that people are used to these inconsistent things are going to have to get used to these consistent things. So if you're someone who hates change, you're going to dislike them. If you're someone who likes things to be standardized, so once you've learned this one way of accessing or doing something, you don't have to learn 3 different ways to do it, you're going to like the change. And guess what? Your users are going to be all over the place. So overall, I think there's more good than bad there. So, and again, anybody have any questions or comments or whatever, just put it in the comments. And moving on. The meaningful news stuff. One of the things that I found really cool, and when I say really cool, I'm exaggerating a little bit. But one thing that I thought was really nice about it is one of the screen layouts. And so here we're used to a standard Windows window, and we're used to the maximize button, but if you hover over the maximize button, you now get this pop-up, drop-down, whatever it is. And this is essentially some pre-built layouts that you can take advantage of. And all you got to do is choose, I want this, and as you hover, and basically I'm going to say I want 1 on the left and then 2 on the right, and I want this window to be on the left. And then it shows me, okay, what window do I want to be on the right? And I'll say that Windows. And then I want so automatically it gives me a way, and again, it gives me 4 options that I can use this to basically predefine how I want to lay out the screen, the window. So if you're somebody who wants to work with on 3 or 4 windows, and especially if you only got 1 monitor, this is kind of a neat way to quickly organize. Those of us who remember, I think it was Windows 8 that had that Windows left arrow, Windows right arrow, Windows up to do split documents. This is kind of the son of, and I kind of like this one actually. Another thing I want to show is multiple desktops. This has been there before as well, but it's a little bit cleaner. By the way, I also talked about widgets. Yeah, here's where you can access widgets as well as the left sweep. Multiple desktops, you can essentially create, and wait for it, multiple desktops. This is essentially separate collection of screens, programs running, whatever you want to do. All these do is just make it so that you can have 2 or 3 versions of your real estate being used simultaneously, and you can switch. And we just tested this out because I wasn't sure. I'm going to switch over to this guy. And here, this is a separate desktop that I set up, and famous last words, you guys still should be hearing me and seeing this. So now I've just got this. So here I'm going to use this for all my news and all of that kind of fun stuff. So I can have a whole bunch of Edge windows running, all of that kind of fun stuff. And then I'll go back over to my other desktop, which hasn't changed. So this is good if you've got some limited real estate space. You know, I've heard it before, and even in this day, in this day and age, the most valuable real estate on the planet is a screen, you know, a computer screen. So if you have, like, I want to keep this stuff opening for my accounting work, I want to keep this stuff open for my development work, I want to keep this stuff open for my social media, I want to keep whatever. What you can do now is, instead of saying, ooh, for every one of those, I need either complete different sets of monitors, or just I'll keep them minimized and bring them up when I need to. Now you can create different screens in your single system and then just switch between the screens. And there is carryover between them. In other words, all of the icons that are on your desktop are going to be on each of those screens. If you delete one or move one from one screen to, you know, it'll move over to the other screen. So the changes go back and forth. So it's a presentation thing more than anything else. But this is kind of nice, if you will. Another thing I want to talk about, and this is both good and bad, and this is one that I'm having a little bit of trouble with owing to the nature of our beast here, is Teams is built in. So Teams, which is Microsoft, and primarily through Microsoft 365, it's their primary collaboration tool. They have integrated a version of Teams is integrated into Windows 11. So like it or not, it is pretty much there. This is a good thing if you are enjoying, if you will, if part of your organization actually uses all of that. But it's one of those where it's my brain just went completely south on this, so I apologize on that. But it is one of those situations or one of those things where if you've got a personal Microsoft account and a corporate Microsoft account for Teams, they don't necessarily work well together. And I have not had the time to really spend on figuring that out, and I'm sure there's a way to do it. But this gives you, built into the desktop, the ability to actually just go in and start chatting using Teams. So there's going to be more and more of an integration in Teams there. Let me get to some of the comments that I'm seeing. Yeah, absolutely, Gary and Steve. Everybody steals. The last truly imaginative idea or all that was fire was a cool thing when it's pointed somewhere else. So, yep. And yeah, Raymond, this is going to be an interesting thing because if they really do open up widgets to third-party developers and all that kind of thing, which of course they're going to have to, how are they going to guarantee the security layers? Now, I'm going to assume that part of it is going to be that the widget mechanism itself is going to have some restrictions, but it'll see. And Dan, nobody's smart enough to see my screen, or they're smart enough to ignore my screen presentation. That could be. So, Chris, as far as compatibility test, processor not compatible, we'll talk about that because that's interesting. And yeah, features are being stolen, features are being taken. Absolutely. So, there are also a couple other things that aren't necessarily going to be part of the demo. But Microsoft 364, excuse me, Windows 11 can actually run Android apps. Part of this is because, at the end of the day, Chrome is part of Edge. There's also a lot of new accessibility features. And then finally, some of the things that you're going to see throughout the whole is Microsoft is really pushing their dog food. So they are integrating Edge and they are integrating Teams are probably the two biggest examples so that you're going to have those of you who want to have Chrome, want to have Firefox, want to have whatever on your computers. I think you're going to have the highest challenge as far as getting away from that. And my understanding is Microsoft is making it possible you can have other browsers and the other browsers will work, but they will be annoying you with "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?" And yeah, so yeah, Steve, I agree with you as far as the corporate laptops, some of these features, and yeah, Gary, you're right as far as Linux. And again, the same thing with Chrome, the same thing with iOS, all of that. Microsoft does, I'm not going to say a better job, although I think that, but Microsoft does a good job in that middle of the road. They make it flexible enough so it can be used, but standardized enough so it can be managed or controlled from a one-to-many standpoint. And that's absolutely debatable and arguable and all that. And yes, Solaris. Jeez. And yep, we have not taken a look yet at the server version of Windows 11 yet, although we certainly will be. And can you still pull up Internet Explorer? I have not tried to because I don't want to. And yeah, how will we install Adobe Flash? I don't know. I still want to get my AOL on this. That's what I'm really holding on. And you can't check compatibility because your organization manages updates on this PC. Well, and you should find a new. Oh wait, that's us. Yeah, and that's actually going to be really interesting, Steve. Is that especially organizations and a lot of banking still require Internet Explorer and all that. So I am sure that there's still going to be a way to do it because Microsoft's not that stupid. But there are definitely going to be some issues. There's some challenges where we're going to find, and we've got some clients, and especially I love on the manufacturing world. You know, we always say that manufacturing, the definition of obsolescence in manufacturing is it didn't turn on. You know, and so I definitely think we're going to still find a lot of applications where we're going to have to ask that question of will it work under this? And this is when we talk about decisions that internal IT people make. This is where we're really going to be talking about. So I would absolutely be very, 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 very cautious of just saying, let's go roll it out. So cool. So hardware requirements, to your point, Chris. The official hardware, which we all know what that means. That means do not under any circumstance buy a computer that small. 1 gigahertz CPU, 4 gig RAM, 64 gig storage. Really, I think there's no really good reason to get a machine with less than 16 gig. The exception would be is if you're going to use this as almost a a diskless workstation or the like. Oh, cool, Gary, thanks for putting that in. Like I said, the real should be 16 gig. Microsoft is only officially supporting 8th gen CPUs. However, they have recently added a couple of 7th gen CPUs to that list. They also need to have the TPM security chip, which is basically the chip that allows you to do encryption. That has to be there. There is no 32-bit version of Windows 11. So it's all 64-bit. Now, it will run most 32-bit programs. Okay, but 64 is going to be the default. If you're buying cheap PCs, they may or may not be up to snuff, and especially if you bought cheap PCs in the past. There is an app, and there's a link to the app that you can run. This is a Microsoft app that you can. You just admit. So there is an app that you can run on your computer that will give you a feel for whether or not that particular hardware is compatible. However, if depending upon your computer, in some cases, the TPM chipset, which handles again the security side, in some cases that can be disabled in the BIOS, in which case that health check may report that as not being there, but it actually is, it's just been disabled. Now, generally speaking, a computer that's been purchased in the past 5 years should pass the TPM requirements, and within the last 3 or 4 years should pass the CPU requirements. The exception being if you purposefully went out and bought as cheap a home computer as possible. Okay. Versions, of course. It's not Microsoft if there aren't 37 versions of it. And this is pretty much it. A lot of these, like Windows 11 Pro Education, Pro for Workstations, a lot of these are as much of a licensing issue as a feature issue. I put a link there that'll give you some idea of what the additions and versions are, and we're still waiting to hear some of the details as far as the feature set behind them. Bottom line, if you are business, you always, you never buy home. You always buy Pro. If you are a home buyer, I'd still probably lean more towards Pro, but you can get away with home if that's an issue. Now, as far as pricing goes, there really isn't going to be much of a change, sort of. So there will be a free upgrade to Windows 10 users. My understanding is you will have to have you'll have to register it through some kind of Microsoft account, whether it's a free Microsoft account or a 365-based account. You're going to have some kind of registration. And this is one of those where you're going to see. see how it goes and see what works for you and all of that kind of fun stuff. There are some people who I'm sure are going to resist giving Microsoft that access or the like. Don't know what to tell you. Microsoft is making a big push for Microsoft 365 for organizations, corporate and otherwise, to handle their licensing through Microsoft 365. Notice I keep saying that and not Office 365. But they're making a much bigger push to handle licensing of desktop OS through Microsoft 365. They're also doing the same thing as far as vulnerability, as far as management, as far as all of that sort of stuff. So over the period of time, you'll see more and more of that. Now, what that might end up being, and I doubt they're going to do this in the next year or so, this is my conjecture, at some point, Microsoft always takes a look at Office, for example, and says you have to have the latest, you have to have the latest, you have to have the latest. And now they've gone to the point through Microsoft 365, you don't have a year version. You don't have Office 2019 or Office, you have Office. Whether or not Microsoft's going to do the same thing for that on the desktop, I don't know. So, but one of the challenges is going to be, and I suspect this will not be an issue for at least a year, but whether or not Microsoft at some point will force Windows 10 users to upgrade to Windows 11 as part of the licensing on 365. If they do it, I can't imagine it's going to happen in 22, and it may not even happen in 23. Ultimately, I think they'll want to, because Microsoft doesn't want to have to support 20 different versions of operating systems and 20 different editions and feature sets and all of that kind of fun stuff. So a couple of questions kept catching up. Oh, they broke the ability to do VirtualBox? I didn't know that. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Yeah, I mean, they want everybody. So again, this gets back to the Microsoft wants to use their dog food, and Microsoft recently announced and released Windows 365, because it wasn't enough to have Office 365, Microsoft 365. Now it's Windows 365, which is their latest version for organizations to use virtual desktops. And we have not gone deep into it yet, but we have started looking at it, and actually it looks pretty cool. But they've got that. So why did they deliver, sorry if I blow your name, but Cricker, or Cricor, why do they deliver Surface Pros with Windows Home Editions? Because they can. I mean, it's stupid. I agree. Well, it's one of those where it does lower the cost by what, $30 or something along those lines to do the Home Edition. I would agree with you. I wouldn't. But so far, Microsoft has not returned my calls on me offering to become their CEO. I don't know why. And they will always, are they still going to be selling standalone Office? They absolutely will continue to do so, but expect price increases, because that's what they've done. They have increased the standalone and the open volume licensing costs for Office and for Windows, and they're going to continue to do that because they want you to use the subscription, the subscription model. You know, it's all about monthly recurring revenue, you know, for just about everybody, including us. And that's, again, strong push for OS licensing through Microsoft 365. So see more and more incentives for companies, especially with Windows 11, to actually push that out through the subscription model. And we can help you if any organization wants to talk about that. There's still traditional licensing, OEM, open value, the like. It should stay similar to Windows 10, except for I expect price increases to happen. Now, here's something else that Microsoft recently announced. They've made a couple announcements recently regarding their pricing for Office, Microsoft, Windows 365. At this point, I expect the pricing for 365 to go up roughly 20% in March of next year. That's regardless of who you get it from, what license, whatever. That seems to be an across-the-board announcement that Microsoft has made. So starting in March, your licensing costs will go up 20%. There's also some talk about them making it harder to decrease license counts. So right now, for companies who go through our licensing model, if you want to take away licenses or add licenses, you can pretty much do that, and you're just responsible for the month. So if someone did it today, you'd be still be responsible for the entire month of September if you dropped license numbers. They are talking now about making that so that's possibly a 12-month commitment. So if you were to decrease the number of licenses that you needed or used 3 months in, you're still going to be responsible for the other 9 months of the licensing. The challenge on that is that's really getting a lot of pushback from partners. And Microsoft has a tendency to announce two bad news things to partners and then back off on one so the other one gets in. I have a feeling that that's what's happening here, and they'll back off on that decreased penalty, whatever you want to call it. But we'll see. So, yeah, it's now. Here's the thing: the 20% increase. This is the first time Microsoft's increased their 365 licensing since I think 2011. So it's almost been 10 years since there's been a price increase. Yep. And Steve, I agree. There will be a month-to-month licensing, and there always has been, but it's always been like 20% higher, 10 or 20% higher. So it will still be there for an organization. So if an organization feels like we need 20 right now, but we may only need 15 for the year, you can buy a year subscription of 15 licenses and then the month to month for those 5 licenses. So there's ways to think about it. What I would do from a budgeting standpoint is I would basically consider that you're going to be hit with at least a 20% license increase for next year. If your numbers are stable, that should be the only increase, or always increasing. Your 20% should be a good rule of thumb. Create a fudge fund of another 15 or 20% if you think it's going to change. Microsoft has never, ever shirked from making their licensing more difficult. So they always figure out how to make licensing more difficult. You know, right? There's a race going on between income tax or tax definition, healthcare requirements, and Microsoft licensing. Those are the three. So, timeline. October 15th, or excuse me, October 5th right now is the in theory date for release for new and existing PCs, for new PCs. And it's only going to be available for systems fully supported by Microsoft. So it's going to be the Gen 8 chips, TPM, all of that kind of fun stuff. Server versions, upgrade versions later this year or early 22. I'm hearing some differing numbers on that. And absolutely, I mean, those of you, chip shortages will impact availability. And also chip shortages, if Microsoft actually has some problems in terms of deploying it, they may blame it on chip shortages. So your mileage may absolutely 100% vary. So planning for deployment. Windows 8.1 is out of the mainstream support. So you're not seeing any more security updates for Windows 8 or 8.1. Full extended support reaches the end in about 2 years, a year and a half. Okay. Windows 10 extended support ends in 2025. So Windows 10 is going to be around for a while. You've got support, so you don't have to jump. But here's the thing, it's coming and it's going to be here, and it's going to be harder and harder past next year to buy Windows 10 machines. So absolutely what I would start now is, for those, this is aimed at you, the internal IT people, sooner or later get a Windows 11 box and start testing, starting with your legacy apps, your legacy printers, all of those kind of things. So far, we have not had much of a problem. But again, I don't have that many legacy systems. But I've got like an 8-year-old printer, worked fine. I've got some networking pieces, worked fine. Working with Active Directory and all of that kind of fun stuff, it's worked fine. There absolutely are going to be some exceptions to that, and we don't know what it is. So get a machine. So how dangerous is to switch a production laptop, same mine, to Windows 11? Can it be rolled back? That's what I did. That's what I ultimately did. But I recognized the fact that this could be the worst mistake I ever made. And so I did it with a machine. And from a production, those of you who know me know I'm not involved with the day-to-day tech stuff here because they won't let me. Uh, so it works reasonably well. Okay. Yeah. Every day? What is this? Work every day stuff. How well does my printer work with the print service disabled? That has been an adventure, hasn't it, Raymond? As far as the latest stuff going on, we actually had to make, and we may talk about that when we go off done with the presentation. Yeah, that's been interesting stuff. So far, we've been able to get through it, but yep. If you want it now on your particular system, what I did was I joined the Windows Insider program that gives you pre-release access, basically beta version, either to the version itself. So I've been on that for Windows 10, Windows 11, all of that kind of fun stuff. And what I did an in-place upgrade from Windows 10. And you have some abilities to give you rollback functionality. Whether or not that rollback functionality depends on what the issue or what the challenge is. And odds are it's going to be on the software. So I would make that assumption that there is no rollback, that you'd have to rebuild from scratch. And obviously don't do it on a critical application. But I've had it now, I've had this machine now for about 2 months. And for the first 6 weeks or so, no, I've had it for longer than it, maybe about 3 months now. And for the first about 4 to 6 weeks, I had to rebuild it 2 or 3 times. And the rebuild took me about 45 minutes. So it wasn't, it wasn't a horrible rebuild. And this is an in-place upgrade. So I upgraded from Windows 10. Upgrading from Windows 10 will keep some of the flotsam and jetsam from Windows 10 in terms of some of the settings and some of the configuration. So if you truly want to test a new machine, download the ISO that's available as part of the Insiders program, format a system, start it from scratch, or just try the Windows Insider and upgrade. Either way, those are available, and it's free. So rounding up, final stuff. This is now we get to the advertisement. Any of you are interested? We've got a new security model, and Ann, if you want to go through this would be great. We've actually got a new security tool that allows us in just a casual conversation to spend about 30, 45 minutes talking about your organization, talking about your cybersecurity, and really come out with some very specific priorities and action items for you to do, whether you're a CEO, whether you're the internal IT person. It's really a cool thing that we are using on this. It's a nice little model. So if you're interested in that, just give me a shout, Bob at simplex-it.com. We'll give you a dark web scan for your organization, copy one of my books, and using that tool in a discussion, a quick summary with next steps identified for you to work on or for us together to work on. Our next webinar is going to be October 21st, 1 to 2 p.m., and we're going to talk specifically about Microsoft Secure Score, which is a misunderstood and underutilized tool that you can do on your 365 tenant to basically get a good feedback and report card on how well your 365 tenant is set up for security. So we're going to do a review on that October 21st from 1 to 2. And as always, we would love to get some feedback from you all. And that is pretty much that. And so, last question, we'll upgrade to F10 to 11 if 10 is also upgrade. Best of my knowledge, if you've got 10 on your system, you'll be able to upgrade to 11. The more upgrades you have, the more possible it is that there's going to be some kind of issue. Just because, again, it has to do with there's so much legacy built in, the older the system is. So with that, for everybody who's watching this on YouTube, thank you very much, and hope to see you next.